Two roommates, both more dead than alive, yet bound to me by a twist of fate. A house that once echoed with solitude now resonates with an eerie silence, their hollow eyes a constant reminder of our peculiar coexistence. I, Cassius Lark, who once sought solitude, now stand at the forefront of an unsettling upheaval, a beacon of hope for the living and the unliving alike.
Cassius Lark squinted into the pale morning light, his fingers twisting the frayed edges of the letter in his hands. The words on the page seemed to dance before his eyes, taunting him with their implications. 2 zombie roommates. The very thought sent a shiver down his spine. A sigh escaped his lips as he scanned his small, cluttered living room. Sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows on the worn floorboards. Cassius grimaced, imagining the undead beings that would soon inhabit this space. He shook his head, banishing the thought, and set to work rearranging the furniture. The heavy scraping of the wooden table against the floor filled the room, punctuated by the occasional grunt of exertion from Cassius. His neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, peered over the fence as he worked. "Getting ready for your new roommates, I see," she observed, her voice tinged with sympathy. "It's quite the adjustment, but you'll manage." Cassius wiped the sweat from his brow and managed a weak smile. "I suppose I have no choice," he replied, his voice tight with apprehension. Days later, Cassius stood in the doorway of his home, his heart pounding in his chest. The arrival of his undead roommates was imminent, and anxiety gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms as he waited. The sound of shuffling footsteps drew his gaze, and Cassius beheld the 2 creatures that would now share his life. The man's skin was a sickly gray, his eyes sunken and glassy. The woman bore the remnants of a once vibrant dress, now tattered and stained. Their movements were jerky, unnatural. "Welcome," Cassius said, his voice wavering. The pair stared at him, their expressions unreadable. Over the following weeks, Cassius struggled to adapt to the presence of his new roommates. Conversations were limited to a series of awkward gestures and strained silences. Frustration simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Cassius began to take notes on the zombies' behavior, his old scientific curiosity resurfacing. He documented their aversion to sunlight, their restlessness in confined spaces, and the peculiar way they seemed to communicate with each other. At a community meeting, Cassius found himself captivated by the fiery rhetoric of Adelaide Mercer, a woman who vehemently opposed the zombie roommates program. Her words stirred something within him, a mixture of fascination and unease. As Cassius lay in bed that night, the soft sounds of his undead roommates' movements echoing through the house, he couldn't help but wonder what forces had brought them all together. What secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of this tenuous coexistence? His resolve solidified, and Cassius vowed to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Cassius rubbed his temples as he stood in the dim kitchen, the eerie silence of the house a stark contrast to the lively birdsong outside. The faint smell of bacon and eggs lingered in the air, a futile attempt to create normalcy in his now abnormal life. As the toast popped up, he heard a soft creaking from the hallway. Zara and Zane shuffled into the kitchen, their movements slow and deliberate. Sunken eyes stared at Cassius as if silently pleading for understanding. He frowned, averting his gaze to avoid confronting the strange amalgamation of curiosity and unease that stirred within him. "Morning," Cassius muttered, unsure if the zombies could comprehend his words. Zara tilted her head, a vestige of humanity lingering in her expression. Cassius placed the food on the table, his eyes flicking between Zara and Zane. He observed their reactions, careful not to let his fascination show. Zara poked at the scrambled eggs, a frown creasing her decaying brow, while Zane eagerly consumed the toast, crumbs falling like confetti. As they ate, Cassius couldn't help but notice how the zombies communicated their preferences through subtle cues. Zara's slight nod of approval at the bacon, Zane's wrinkled nose at the sight of orange juice. These fleeting glimpses of their lingering humanity tugged at Cassius's heart. Later that day, Cassius found an old photograph of Zara and Zane, their faces unmarred by decay. He traced their features, wondering about their lives before they became the walking dead. The photograph brought back memories of his own life before the apocalypse, a bittersweet ache gripping his chest. That evening, a community gathering was held to discuss the challenges of cohabitating with zombies. The air was thick with tension as neighbors shared their experiences, some heartwarming, others horrifying. Adelaide Mercer took the stage, her voice dripping with venom as she recounted the dangers posed by the undead. Cassius listened, captivated and disturbed by her persuasive arguments. That night, Cassius awoke to find Zara and Zane attempting to communicate with him. Through a series of gestures and crude drawings, they conveyed their desire for a more comfortable living arrangement. They also revealed a clandestine detail from their past existence, their full identities, Zara Alastair and Zane Beatrice. This affected Cassius deeply. Cassius's heart ached, torn between empathy for the zombies and concern for his own safety. He lay awake, pondering his options. The next morning, Cassius hesitantly agreed to improve Zara and Zane's living conditions. In the back of his mind, however, he vowed to keep a watchful eye on Adelaide and her faction, wary of the escalating tensions between the living and the undead. As Cassius embarked on this journey of discovery, the seeds of doubt and fear took root, foreshadowing the challenges that lay ahead in this delicate balancing act of coexistence. Cassius sat on the edge of his bed, the creak of the aged mattress serving as a soundtrack to his mounting unease. Alastair and Beatrice, his undead roommates, shuffled about the cramped living space, their hollow eyes never quite meeting his gaze. The dim light that filtered through the curtains cast a ghoulish glow on their decaying flesh. He watched as Alastair absently traced the patterns on the wallpaper, an unsettling display of a once human curiosity. Sleep eluded Cassius. His nights were plagued by vivid nightmares that left him drenched in cold sweat, the memories of his battles with the undead lingering like the stench of death. The town hall was a buzz of hushed voices and nervous energy as Cassius took his seat among the gathered townsfolk. The murmur of conversation filled the air, a tapestry of whispered fears and tentative hope. On a makeshift stage, a woman stood, her pen hovering over a chalkboard. She wrote a single word, the chalk's screech echoing through the hall: coexistence. A chorus of voices rose in response, sharing their own experiences with their zombie roommates. Cassius listened intently, his brow furrowing as he processed the tales of friendship, camaraderie, and even love that bloomed in the most unlikely of places. Adelaide Mercer, her eyes alight with a cold fire, spoke up. "But can we truly trust these creatures?" she asked, her voice dripping with contempt. "How can we forget the bloodshed, the loss of our loved ones, the destruction they've wrought?" Her words hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud of doubt that threatened to choke out the light of understanding. The seed of unease planted by Adelaide's rhetoric took root in the shadows of the town. Graffiti marred once pristine walls, symbols of a growing anti-zombie movement. Hushed conversations in the marketplace spoke of violent confrontations between Adelaide's followers and the households that had opened their doors to the undead. It was amidst this turbulence that Cassius stumbled upon a relic of Alastair's past. A worn leather journal, its pages filled with the elegant scrawl of a man who had dedicated his life to unraveling the mysteries of the universe. The words on the pages breathed life into the scientist that Alastair had once been, transforming him from a faceless monster into a man with a story, a history, and a soul. Cassius held the journal close to his chest, a newfound determination blossoming within him. He approached Alastair and Beatrice, offering them a piece of chalk and a small slate. Their eyes met, the flicker of a shared understanding passing between them. As the chalk moved across the slate, a fragile bond began to form, a bridge between the living and the unliving. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the land, Cassius couldn't help but feel the weight of the world upon his shoulders. The chasm between the living and the undead seemed insurmountable, the future uncertain. But as he sat with Alastair and Beatrice, their silent conversation unfolding in a symphony of chalk and slate, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. A hope that perhaps, one day, they could forge a world where the living and the unliving could coexist in peace. The following day, Cassius emerged from the chaos of the world outside. He made his way home, filled with anticipation at the thought of seeing his unconventional roommates again. Their names were Zara Alastair and Zane Beatrice. These were no ordinary names, but identities that carried a deeper significance. They served as reminders of a time when these individuals were humans, just like him. Cassius approached the door to his home, noticing a faint, eerie shadow beneath the crack. He cautiously stepped inside, eyes widening as he beheld the scene before him. Zara and Zane, his usually reserved zombie roommates, stood protectively over a trembling Zane, their rigid posture a stark contrast to the aggressive stance of two unfamiliar zombies. "Who are these intruders?" Cassius demanded, his voice echoing through the dimly lit room. The scent of tension and unease lingered in the air, a palpable presence that weighed heavily on his chest. Zara's hollow gaze met his, and her guttural voice answered, "These are Zola and Xander. They have come with a message." Cassius frowned, observing the newcomers' tattered clothes and the predatory glint in their eyes. "And what message do they bring?" Zola stepped forward, her voice a raspy whisper. "Adelaide Mercer sent us. She wants to remind you that the peace you've found is but an illusion." Cassius's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a drum heralding the gathering storm. "You mean Adelaide is planning to sabotage the truce between humans and zombies?" Xander nodded, his grotesque features twisted into a grimace. "She believes the undead pose a threat to humanity's survival. She wants to see them eliminated." As the gravity of the situation sank in, Cassius paced the room, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He knew he couldn't confront Adelaide alone. He needed allies. Reaching out to old friends and acquaintances, Cassius painted a picture of a world on the brink of chaos, persuading them to join his cause. Meanwhile, the once bustling streets had become a twisted labyrinth of fear and paranoia as both humans and zombies eyed each other warily, distrust gnawing at the fragile fabric of their coexistence. The skies above, once a brilliant blue, now brooded with dark, ominous clouds, reflecting the simmering tension below. Through hushed conversations and secret rendezvous, Cassius and his allies began to unearth the extent of Adelaide's treachery. As they delved deeper, Cassius discovered a hidden connection to his adversary. Adelaide was once a respected scientist, a former colleague of his. The revelation weighed heavily on his soul as memories of their shared past resurfaced. Standing on the precipice of change, Cassius steeled himself for the battle ahead. The wind whispered through the trees, caressing his face like the ghosts of the past. He knew that confronting Adelaide would test the limits of his resolve, but he was prepared to fight for a future where humans and zombies could coexist in harmony. With the evidence secured and his allies united, Cassius took a deep breath, the air thick with anticipation. As he gazed into the darkening sky, he felt the world shift beneath his feet, poised on the edge of a new beginning or a descent into chaos. Cassius stood in the dim basement, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was musty, and a single flickering light bulb cast eerie shadows across the room. He ran a finger along the dusty surface of a workbench, surveying the haphazard arrangement of test tubes and beakers. His skin prickled as a sense of foreboding crept over him. He picked up a stack of yellowed research notes, the spidery handwriting barely legible. As he pored over the documents, realization dawned on him. Adelaide was involved in the creation of the zombies. The weight of the knowledge bore down on him, and Cassius knew he couldn't keep this secret. Adelaide leaned against the wall, her arms folded defensively across her chest. Cassius stood in front of her, jaw set and eyes ablaze with determination. "Adelaide, these notes bear your name. You were part of the team that created the zombies, weren't you?" Cassius demanded, the accusation heavy in his voice. She hesitated, her eyes darting away for a moment before she met his gaze. "Yes, I was," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But things got out of control. I couldn't contain the consequences of our actions." Cassius watched as her eyes filled with tears, her clenched fists betraying her anguish. He realized that her crusade against the undead was fueled by guilt and fear. Days later, Cassius gathered his allies in his living room, the two zombie roommates standing silently in the corner. He unveiled his plan to expose Adelaide's deception and dismantle her faction. The room buzzed with hushed voices as friends and neighbors whispered their thoughts and concerns. Night had fallen as Cassius and his allies crept through the shadows, approaching Adelaide's headquarters. The air was thick with tension, each of them aware of the stakes. As they infiltrated the compound, they discovered a group of captive zombies, a subplot of Adelaide's twisted scheme. Together, they released the prisoners and pressed onward. Cassius stood in the center of Adelaide's assembly hall, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. Her followers looked on in disbelief as he revealed her secrets, the damning evidence laid bare. Adelaide's face crumpled with shock and panic, her words catching in her throat. As the crowd erupted into chaos, a fierce battle ensued between Adelaide's faction and Cassius's group. The zombie roommates fought alongside their human counterparts, their actions speaking louder than any words. Adelaide tried to escape, but Cassius chased her down. The two engaged in a grueling duel, their struggle echoed by the sounds of the ongoing battle around them. In the end, Cassius managed to corner Adelaide, but not before suffering a wound on his arm during the scuffle. With Adelaide captured and her treachery exposed, the battle eventually subsided. In the following days, Cassius found himself in the safety of his home, his wound tended to, and Adelaide's faction disassembled. The city began to heal, and so did its inhabitants, but Cassius's wound healed slower than expected. And it wasn't just the physical wound. Cassius could feel a change within him, a dark transformation he couldn't put into words. One day while he was cooking in the kitchen, the scent of the food turned his stomach. He found the sensation odd. Each day after, he noticed other peculiarities, the light sensitivity, the distant echoing sounds, the chill that seemed to linger under his skin. He denied the evidence in front of him for days until it became impossible to ignore. His reflection in the mirror told a story he was reluctant to read. Cassius, standing in the harsh light of his kitchen, swallowed hard as he confessed the truth to himself. He was turning into a zombie, the very beings he had vowed to coexist with. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. He felt a growl of discontent rise from his throat, the sound foreign and unsettling. His gaze fell on the ingredients scattered on his countertop. He couldn't taste them anymore, not the way he used to. But he was determined. He would cook, he would eat, he would keep on living. Cassius refused to let his transformation become his downfall. While grappling with his new reality, his resolve was rekindled. His mission had changed. He would spend his remaining days, be it as a man or a zombie, striving for a world where both could live in harmony. His heart heavy with determination, Cassius continued to search for ingredients to start cooking his meal.